The cabin walls rattled like a dying heartbeat, snow hissing against the wooden planks as though the blizzard wanted to claw its way in. Of all the godforsaken places I could have ended up tonight, it had to be here, trapped in a cabin with him. My rival. My reminder of every case I'd ever lost. Every smug smirk across the courtroom table. Every late-night autopsy he'd made look like art while I stumbled behind like an amateur. Dr. Ethan Hale. Forensic pathologist. Genius. Perfectionist. Insufferable know-it-all. And the one man I swore I'd never let get under my skin. "Don't just stand there glaring," he snapped, tossing a damp log into the fireplace. His blonde hair stuck to his forehead, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "If you want to freeze to death, be my guest, but I'd rather not." I clenched my jaw. "You think a few sticks of wood are going to save us from a blizzard like this? You're smarter than that, Hale." "Correction," he shot back, blue eyes glittering in the firelight. "I'm smarter than you. Always have been." God, he knew exactly where to cut. I dropped my bag onto the creaking wooden floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. "Don't start. Don't start." His laugh was bitter, short, like he'd swallowed broken glass. "You've been starting for years." The storm outside howled, but inside it was no quieter. Our voices rose, clashing harder than the wind. We'd been circling each other for years. In morgues, in courtrooms, in the sterile glow of labs. Tonight, the circle had tightened, leaving us no room to run. "Why the hell did you even come on this trip?" he demanded, turning his back on me, shoulders tense beneath his coat. I hesitated. Truth was, I didn't know. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit it. "Because the sheriff asked me," I muttered. He spun around. "Bullshit. You could have said no." The fire cracked between us, throwing sparks. My hands curled into fists. "Maybe I wanted to prove something." His lips twisted into a cruel smile. "To me." Silence. That one word dug deeper than any scalpel. Hours dragged, the storm tightening its grip. The cabin was suffocating, heat and cold battling in the air like our pride. Every creak of the roof reminded us we were fragile here, human, breakable. And for the first time, I saw it underneath Ethan's sharp edges. There was exhaustion. He sat by the fire, rubbing his temples, his breath heavy. The storm had peeled something from him. His armor, maybe, or his carefully curated disdain. "You ever get tired?" I asked quietly. He looked up, startled. "Of what?" "Of fighting. Of proving. Of being this person all the time." His expression flickered, just for a moment, and I saw him, the man behind the rival. Vulnerable. Lonely. "You think you're the only one who's tired?" he whispered. The hours wore us down. Anger softened into silence. Silence became uneasy laughter. And laughter, God help us, turned into something far more dangerous. It happened like this. The fire burned low, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Ethan leaned too close while tossing another log in, his shoulder brushing mine. The touch was accidental, meaningless, but it jolted through me like a live wire. I didn't move, neither did he. We stared at each other, the space between us charged, heavy, unbearable. His lips parted, breath uneven. My chest ached with everything I wanted to say but couldn't. "You hate me," he murmured. "Maybe," I admitted. "But maybe I hate how much I don't." And then it happened. His mouth on mine, sudden, fierce, desperate. Years of rivalry poured out in that kiss, every insult, every glare, every unspoken longing. It was fire meeting fire, storm meeting storm, and it left me gasping, undone. The storm outside roared louder, but inside the cabin, all I could hear was him. His breath, his heartbeat, the way he whispered my name like it meant something. Maybe it did. The kiss ended as suddenly as it began, like both of us had remembered the rules we'd lived by for years. Enemies didn't kiss. Rivals didn't lose themselves in each other's mouths. And men like Usman, who'd built entire careers on being untouchable, didn't tremble in the dark over the warmth of another man's lips. Ethan pulled back first, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run miles through the storm. His eyes were wide, pupils blown, lips red and wet. He looked younger, undone, stripped of every layer of superiority he usually wrapped himself in. Don't, his voice cracked. He swallowed, tried again. Don't read into that. I laughed, but it was sharp, humorless. Too late. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, filled with the kind of truth neither of us wanted to admit. My pulse was still erratic, every nerve screaming for more. His hands flexed at his sides, like he was holding himself back from reaching for me again. The storm outside raged harder, snow pelting against the glass, the roof groaning under its weight. Inside, the fire crackled, but it wasn't enough to warm the ice forming between us. Hours blurred together. We tried ignoring it, tried pretending nothing had happened. But you can't put a wildfire back in the matchbox. I sat at the wooden table, flipping through the sheriff's case files we'd hauled up here. Missing hiker, last seen 3 days ago, car found abandoned on a forest road. I wanted the distraction, but the words swam. I could feel Ethan's gaze from the other side of the cabin, searing holes into the back of my neck. You're pretending pretty damn well, he said finally. I didn't look up. At what? That it didn't happen. My hands tightened around the file. And what do you want me to do, Hale? Write it down in the report? Evidence. One reckless kiss in a snowstorm. His chair scraped back. Footsteps crossed the creaky floor. Then he was behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. Close enough that my resolve cracked. Stop running, he whispered. I turned, and suddenly his hand was on my jaw, firm but trembling. Our mouths collided again. Slower this time, deeper, every ounce of anger melting into want. And God help me, I let him. By the time we broke apart, the fire had burned to embers. My hand was still fisted in the collar of his sweater. His fingers pressed to my neck like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. What are we doing? I asked, the words ragged. He closed his eyes. Something we should have done years ago. But the world doesn't let men like us rest in stolen moments. A crack echoed outside loud, sharp, like a tree splintering under the weight of snow. We both froze. Another crack followed, then a groan, and the unmistakable sound of something massive collapsing. Shit! Ethan hissed, rushing to the window. He wiped frost off the glass with his sleeve, peering into the swirling white. That was close. A tree must have come down near the cabin. My stomach tightened. We're not getting out of here tonight. He turned, and for once, there was no smugness in his face. Only fear. Real, unguarded fear. We piled blankets by the fire, rationed what little food we had. Granola bars, jerky, water from melted snow. Survival stripped us down to essentials, and there was something terrifyingly intimate about it. About watching him brush frost from his eyelashes. About sharing a blanket when the cold sank too deep into our bones. At one point, Ethan pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, his fingers lingering a second too long. I know you hate me, he murmured. I swallowed. I don't. He studied me in the flickering light, blue eyes searching, as if trying to read the truth off my skin. Then what is this? I wanted to say it. I wanted to give it a name. But names made things real, and real was dangerous. Real meant going back to town where people knew us, where whispers spread faster than wildfire, where two men, especially us, couldn't afford to be seen like this. So I said nothing, and he didn't push. The storm raged on, but sleep eventually claimed us. I woke in the middle of the night to find his arm slung across my chest, his face pressed into my shoulder. For a long moment, I just lay there, listening to his breath, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my side. I'd never admit it, but it felt like the safest I'd been in years. Morning came gray and bitter, the storm easing but not gone. We forced ourselves up, moving stiffly through the motions of survival, rekindling the fire, checking supplies, taking turns clearing snow from the door so we wouldn't be sealed in. It was during one of those trips outside, my shovel biting into the snow, that I saw it. A flash of color, half buried near the tree line. Ethan, I shouted, my breath fogging in the freezing air. Over here. He came running, boots crunching through the drifts. Together, we clawed the snow away, revealing what lay beneath. A backpack, torn. Blood smeared across the straps, frozen into the fabric. The missing hiker. We dragged it back to the cabin, dumping it on the table. The blood was old, dark. Inside, we found scraps of clothing, a broken flashlight, a pocket knife. Ethan's face hardened as he examined the stains. Not an accident, he muttered. Not with this much blood. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. You think someone else is out here? His eyes met mine, sharp, calculating. I think whoever hurt him might still be. And just like that, the cabin wasn't a refuge anymore. It was a trap. That night, every creak in the wood made my heart pound. We sat close by the fire, not speaking, listening to the wind and the possibility of footsteps in the snow. At one point, Ethan reached over, his hand brushing mine. If something happens, he said quietly, I need you to know. I don't hate you. I never did. I turned to him, searching his face. He wasn't lying. Not this time. I know, I whispered, and for the first time I believed it. But outside, in the shadows of the storm, someone was watching. The wind outside had become a howl of fury, but inside, the cabin felt like the eye of a hurricane, quiet, tense, pregnant with anticipation. Ethan and I sat close together, shoulders almost touching, as though proximity could shield us from whatever lurked beyond the snow-draped trees. Every sound, the snapping of ice, the groan of timber, the occasional distant crack made both of us flinch. I picked up the remains of the hiker's backpack again, studying the torn straps. He didn't stand a chance, I murmured. Ethan's hands brushed mine as he leaned over. We still don't know what happened. Could have been an animal. Maybe not. His blue eyes were sharp, hawk-like, scanning the room even while they searched my face for something I didn't dare name. Our hands lingered together, fingers grazing, and I realized my chest was tight not from fear, but from him. Every moment with Ethan now carried the weight of more than survival. It carried longing, confusion, and an unbearable ache for connection. We took turns keeping watch through the windows, scanning the white blur for any signs of life or death. Hours dragged. The sun, a pale disk behind endless gray clouds, never truly warmed the world outside. Do you ever think about, before all this? I asked quietly, leaning my forehead against the frosted glass. Before what? Ethan replied, voice low. Before we became. Whatever this is, I said, glancing at him over my shoulder. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. I think about it, he admitted. All the time. About the choices we made, the fights, the pride. I wish things had been different. His words struck me like a punch. For years, we'd circled each other in professional arenas, trading insults, challenging every move. But hearing him admit vulnerability, the way his voice trembled ever so slightly made the tension between us unbearable. And I wanted him more than I'd ever wanted anything. Night fell again, heavy and absolute. The cabin was dim, the fire struggling against the cold. We'd managed to settle the backpack into a corner, covered with blankets. Its grim presence a silent reminder of danger beyond the walls. Ethan sat on the floor, back against the table. We need a plan for tomorrow, he said, his tone practical, professional. But I could hear the edge of worry in his voice. I crouched beside him, brushing snow from my coat. First, we need rest. Then we figure out the rest. He didn't argue, but he shifted closer, shoulders brushing mine. Our knees bumped, fingers occasionally touching. The air between us was electric, every contact setting my nerves alight. And then, before either of us could think, our lips met again, slower, more deliberate. No anger this time, no rivalry, only the truth we'd been avoiding for years. I pressed closer, and Ethan leaned into me, hands sliding to my hips, trembling slightly. We didn't speak. Words would ruin it. But every breath, every touch, Every whisper of movement spoke volumes. Morning brought with it a faint orange glow behind the clouds, illuminating the snow-crusted trees. The storm had passed, but danger hadn't. Someone or something had been stalking the missing hiker, and we were trapped in the cabin with only our instincts and each other. Ethan grabbed the rifle from the corner, checking it methodically. "We have to investigate," he said. His voice was steady, professional, but there was a subtle tremor betraying fear. I nodded, checking the small first aid kit and grabbing a flashlight. "Together," I said. "Together," he agreed, and for the first time it wasn't a forced truce. It was a choice. We stepped out into the white wilderness, boots crunching over thick snow. The forest was silent, every branch coated with frost, every shadow long and menacing. I stayed close to Ethan, heart pounding not just from the cold, but from the thrill of proximity, the unspoken promise in every glance. The backpack was our first clue. We followed footprints, partially obscured by snowdrifts. Every so often, Ethan would pause, scanning the trees. I could feel his hand brush against mine as we moved, a tiny contact, but it sent sparks through me. Then we saw it marks on the snow, dragged footprints leading into a small ravine. Blood. Fresh. "Shit," Ethan muttered. He crouched, inspecting the tracks. Someone's still here. Someone dangerous. My pulse raced. I wanted to panic, but the heat of Ethan next to me steadied me. "We stick together. No heroics." His hand brushed mine, lingering, and I realized neither of us needed to say it. We couldn't face this alone. The ravine was narrow, surrounded by jagged rocks and trees, snow packed unevenly. Our breaths puffed invisible clouds as we descended carefully. Then we heard a rustling, a whisper of movement. "Stay behind me," Ethan whispered. I did, heart hammering, every muscle coiled. And then, a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, hooded, gloves caked in snow, eyes hidden. He carried something, a knife glinting in the pale light. "Stop!" Ethan shouted, stepping in front of me, rifle raised. The figure froze, then lunged. What followed was chaos. Snow kicked up, rifle discharged, ice cracked beneath our boots. I felt Ethan's arm loop around mine, pulling me out of the way of a wild swing. We fought together, instinctively, our bodies moving in unison like we'd done it 1,000 times before. And in the middle of the struggle, our faces were inches apart, breaths mingling, hearts pounding, and I realized something terrifyingly simple. I couldn't imagine surviving this without him. We overpowered the intruder, pinned him to the ground, adrenaline surging. Ethan's eyes met mine, wide and unguarded, and in that moment, I saw everything: fear, relief, desire. "Are you okay?" I asked, voice raw. He nodded, brushing snow from my hair. "I am. Now." Back in the cabin, we tied the intruder up with rope, calling the sheriff once the storm subsided enough for a phone signal. The tension between us dissolved into something warmer, softer. The adrenaline had cracked our walls, leaving us exposed. Ethan sank onto the floor beside the fire, exhaustion written in every line of his face. I sat next to him, shoulder to shoulder, blanket draped over us both. "I never wanted it to come to this," he murmured. "Neither did I admitted. "But maybe it had to." Our hands found each other again, fingers entwining naturally, effortlessly. No words, no need for them. The storm outside had brought death, danger, and terror, but inside, it had also brought truth. Truth that we were no longer rivals, no longer pretending, no longer hiding behind pride or fear. Night fell again, quieter now. The cabin smelled of smoke and pine, warm and safe. Ethan rested his head on my shoulder, fingers tracing idle patterns along my arm. "I think we might survive this," I whispered. He looked up, blue eyes reflecting firelight, shadowed with emotion. "I think we might survive each other." I laughed softly, a short, genuine laugh, and pressed a kiss to his temple. "I don't just want to survive. I want to live with you." And for the first time, in the heart of the wilderness, surrounded by snow and silence, I believed we could. The morning after the storm, the sheriff arrived, taking the intruder and investigating the hiker's disappearance. Ethan and I watched from the cabin, shoulder to shoulder, hands still entwined. Outside, the snow gleamed, untouched, pristine. "We should head back," he said finally, voice calm, resolute. I nodded. "But we're going together." He smiled, that same impossible, maddening, perfect smile that had tormented me for years. Together. As we stepped into the bright, cold sunlight, I realized that the storm had changed everything, not just the landscape, but us. Every fight, every rivalry, every stolen glance and kiss had led us here. And now, finally, there was no running. Only us. The snow had melted into a delicate crust of ice, turning the forest into a glittering, dangerous labyrinth. The sheriff had taken the intruder away, leaving us alone again, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. The cabin, once a prison of tension and rivalry, had become a sanctuary. Ethan and I were quiet that morning, sipping lukewarm coffee, our knees brushing under the small kitchen table. Words felt unnecessary. Everything had been said in firelight, in kisses, in the adrenaline of survival. But reality was creeping back in, whispering that life outside the cabin was still complicated, messy, and unforgiving. "I'm going to have to report this," Ethan said finally, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "Everything that happened, every detail. We can't just pretend it didn't." I nodded. "I know. But we can do it together." He looked up at me then, and the tension I'd known for years, the rivalry, the pride, the thin line between hatred and desire was gone. Only clarity remained. "Together," he echoed. The drive back to town was silent, save for the crunch of tires on icy roads. We were both still raw, emotionally exposed. I watched him through the rearview mirror, noticing the way his hair fell across his forehead, the faint shadow under his eyes from sleepless nights. It hit me how fragile he was beneath that sharp, confident exterior. When we reached town, the world seemed impossibly bright and loud. Cars honked, people rushed about, oblivious to the snowstorm's aftermath or to the secrets we carried. We walked side by side into the sheriff's office, our shoulders touching lightly. The investigation was tedious but necessary. We gave statements, went over the timeline, and reviewed evidence. The intruder had been part of a small criminal network in the area, and the missing hiker had been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Justice, in its imperfect form, began to take shape. Through it all, Ethan and I moved as a unit. The touch of his hand on my back, the subtle glances we exchanged in the fluorescent-lit hallways, made every tedious moment bearable. People assumed we were colleagues, rivals even, but only we knew the truth of the fire that had sparked and never gone out. The first night back in town, we found ourselves on Ethan's porch, staring at the stars. The world felt impossibly normal, almost dull, after the intensity of the cabin. But the silence between us was comfortable, intimate. "You ever think about what comes next?" I asked, fingers brushing against his. Ethan's gaze softened. "I think about us, about not pretending anymore, about finally being honest." I swallowed. "Even if people judge?" He shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Let them. I'd rather have them talk than lose you because I was too afraid to be myself." I wanted to laugh, cry, scream all at once. Instead, I kissed him, slow and deliberate, tasting the memory of the cabin fire and the storm outside. He responded immediately, pressing close, as though confirming that nothing had changed except the world around us. Over the next weeks, life tried to assert itself. Work, responsibilities, social expectations, but nothing could erase the bond forged in snow, fear, and stolen moments. We moved carefully at first, holding hands in public only when we were sure no one was watching. But small acts of courage became easier, and each time our confidence grew. One evening, we attended a community gathering. Townsfolk milled about, oblivious to the intensity of our past weeks. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt a rush of pride. We belonged to this world, yes, but we belonged to each other more. The real test came when a former colleague, someone who had always tried to undermine me professionally, made a cutting remark about unusual alliances between two men in the field. The room froze, and I could feel Ethan's hand tighten around mine. I took a deep breath, feeling the fire from the cabin reawaken inside me. "We're more than colleagues," I said calmly, voice steady. "And there's nothing unusual about loyalty, trust, or love." There was a pause. Then, applause. Small at first, tentative. But it grew as others realized we weren't hiding, weren't ashamed, and weren't backing down. Ethan smiled at me, the kind of smile that makes your chest ache, filled with relief, pride, and something I could only call hope. From that night onward, we lived openly. The rivalry that had once defined us transformed into a deep, abiding partnership. Work became collaboration, not competition. Our social circle widened slowly, but those who mattered accepted us, leaving the judgmental whispers behind. Ethan and I shared apartments, meals, laughter, and quiet evenings on the porch. We rebuilt trust in the world around us, brick by brick, while our trust in each other strengthened with every shared sunrise. One winter evening, almost a year after the storm, we returned to the cabin not out of necessity, but out of memory. The snow had returned, soft and light this time. No blizzard, no fear. We unpacked blankets and firewood, laughing as we tried to remember how to light a fire together. When the flames finally crackled, we sat close, shoulders touching, the air warm and safe around us. I looked at Ethan, really looked, and saw every battle we'd fought against each other, against the world, against ourselves. "You know," I said softly, "if it weren't for that storm, none of this would have happened." He laughed, leaning against me. "Neither would the fights, the rivalries, the kisses." I turned to him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Don't forget the danger," I teased. He smiled, blue eyes catching the firelight. "That too. But mostly, it brought us here, together." And there it was, the undeniable truth. Everything, every storm, every struggle, every moment of pride and defiance, had led us here. Not just alive, but in love. I kissed him, deep and unhurried, tasting warmth, relief, and the kind of love that had been forged in snow, blood, and fire. He kissed back with equal fervor, and for the first time I didn't care who saw, what the world thought, or what the future might bring. Because we had survived the storm, and now we would face everything else together. The cabin, once a crucible of rivalry and tension, became a symbol of our journey. Every creak in the floorboards reminded us of fear overcome. Every shadow flickering in the firelight spoke of intimacy, trust, and the courage to choose each other despite everything. We stayed until the snow fully melted, lingering in the silence of the forest, savoring the peace. Then, hand in hand, we walked back to town, stepping into the world not as enemies, not as rivals, but as partners, lovers, and equals. The townspeople watched us, some curious, some surprised, but we held our heads high. Each step, each glance, each touch was a declaration. We had fought storms both outside and inside ourselves, and we had won. Ethan slipped his hand into mine, thumb brushing over knuckles. "I love you," he whispered, voice low and steady. "I love you too," I replied, my heart full, the memory of every battle, every blizzard, every stolen kiss echoing in my chest. And for the first time in years, everything was right. Life moved forward, cases were solved, seasons changed, and our love only deepened. We celebrated victories, mourned losses, and held fast to each other through every trial. The world could judge, criticize, or doubt us. But in the sanctuary of our hearts, forged in snow, conflict, and fire, we had found home. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.